On an autumn afternoon in 1938, 15 students walked out of Ravenwell Academy and vanished. No footprints, no ransom, just silence. 87 years later, a detective reopens the case and uncovers something buried deeper than bodies. This isn't just a cold case, it's a threshold. If you love stories that crawl under your skin, subscribe, because tonight, we're stepping into the Ravenwell disappearances. Autumn sunlight leaked through a thin veil of dust. Coating the floorboards of the old archive in gray shimmer, Detective Eleanor Raines stood before a filing cabinet labeled Ravenwell Academy, 1938 to 1940, the steel drawers swollen with humidity and silence. Her hands trembled slightly, not from age, though she was nearly 60, but from something older than memory. The case had been her father's obsession and his shame. When the drawers groaned open, a smell of paper rot filled the air, sweet and sour. Inside lay a single envelope marked in fountain pen, 15. Inside that, one photograph, 15 smiling students in pressed uniforms, their faces frozen mid-laughter. Behind them, the ivy-covered facade of Ravenwell Academy. At the photo's bottom edge, the name of the photographer had been neatly scratched out. Eleanor traced the scratches. Whoever erased the name had done so with intent, pressing deep enough to tear the paper. She held the image under the flickering light, and for a second, something moved in the reflection. A faint shimmer behind the glass of a classroom window, a shape too tall to be a child. Her breath hitched. "Found you," she whispered. Outside, rain began to fall over Hollow County for the first time in months. Slow, deliberate, like footsteps approaching from far away. The field behind Ravenwell had long since gone to ruin. Brambles clung to rusted wire, and what used to be the gymnasium was now a husk of caved rafters and broken glass. But on the morning of October 3rd, 1938, the air had smelled of cut grass and chalk dust, normal, ordinary. 15 students, aged 13 to 17, were signed out of class for a short disciplinary exercise, escorted by their history teacher, Mr. Leonard Harrow. He'd been with the school less than a year, quiet, precise, his collar always too tight. Witnesses remembered how he lined the children up 2 by 2, his roll call voice flat as stone by sundown. The gatekeeper swore he saw them walking toward the north field, their silhouettes blending into fog. They never came back. The next morning, Harrow's classroom was empty. His apartment above the east wing, empty. No sign of struggle, no note. Only a faint smell of sulfur and a single item left on his desk. An open pocket watch. Its hands stopped at 4:11 p.m. Police combed the grounds for days. Bloodhounds were brought in from Dallas, digging up patches of soil until the land looked flayed. Nothing. No footprints beyond the fence line. No sign of vehicles. Then the school received a letter, postmarked from 3 towns away. No return address. Inside, a torn page from a student ledger. Names crossed out in ink so thick it had eaten through the paper at the bottom. One word written in an unfamiliar hand. Returned. For weeks, headlines bloomed across Texas papers. 15 vanish in broad daylight. The Ravenwell affair. But as the war in Europe deepened, the story faded, buried under other disappearances. Only one person never let it go. Detective Joseph Raines, Eleanor's father. He worked the case until 1955, the year he drowned in the lake 2 miles from Ravenwell's Northfield official cause, accidental fall. But Eleanor, 12 years old at the time, remembered the state troopers' words when they came to the door. "Your father was still talking about those kids, even that morning. Said he was close to something." Now, in 2025, the school was slated for demolition. Eleanor stood at the same fence line, wind needling through her coat. The grass whispered around her boots. In the distance, the gymnasium skeleton leaned toward collapse. She stepped through the gap in the fence, flashlight cutting through the gray. The beam caught on something metallic, half buried under weeds, a whistle. Old, tarnished, stamped with an emblem she recognized. Ravenwell Athletic League, 1937. She pocketed it, but as she turned, her light fell across something stranger. A series of shallow impressions in the soil, 15 of them, arranged in a loose arc. Not graves, too shallow, but deliberate. Each marked by a small white stone placed dead center. Her breath misted. The stones looked new. A soft sound carried across the wind, the faint, rhythmic echo of metal tapping against metal. Eleanor froze. Hello? No answer. The sound came again, closer now. A slow clink, pause, clink. She swept her light across the weeds and caught a flicker of reflection. A silver chain, swinging from the branches of a dead tree. Hanging from it, the same kind of pocket watch found on Harrow's desk decades earlier. Its face was cracked, hands rusted in place, but the engraving on the back was clear. Property of R.A., return always. Eleanor's pulse stuttered. R.A. Ravenwell Academy, or something else. Then, from the darkness, a whisper. You're late. She spun, but the field was empty. Wind pushed through the grass again, carrying faint laughter, children's laughter, so distant it could have been memory. Her flashlight flickered once, twice, then died. Only the ticking of unseen clocks remained, counting something neither she nor the town of Hollow County had ever stopped owing. Outside the fence, the rain began again. The demolition crews arrived 3 days later, their machines groaning across the soaked field like beasts waking from sleep. Hollow County's November rain had turned the soil to sludge, and fog hung so thick it blurred the line between earth and sky. Detective Eleanor Raines signed the access form with a hand that wouldn't quite stop shaking. The Ravenwell site was fenced, taped, legally dead, but something inside her refused to treat it like a ruin. It felt more like a patient whose pulse she could still hear if she listened hard enough. Morning, Detective. The foreman approached. Yellow hard hat, clipboard under one arm. His name tag read, Tanner Boyd. We're pulling the East Foundation today. Anything we should look out for? Artifacts, she said. And bones. He half smiled, thinking she was joking. When she didn't smile back, his face changed. By noon, the excavator's claw tore into the gymnasium's foundation. Concrete cracked open in wet bursts, mud geysered up, spraying the crew's boots. Then one of the workers yelled. Something pale had surfaced in the churned soil. Cloth, not bone, wrapped around a long shape. The foreman waved his arms. Kill the engine! The silence after machinery stopped was deafening. Eleanor pulled on gloves and crouched beside the find. The cloth was canvas, school-issue satchel. When she lifted it free, water streamed from the seams, carrying the smell of mildew and iron. Inside were notebooks sealed in plastic sleeves, astonishingly intact. She eased one open. On the front cover, a name written in elegant looping hand. Clara Rowe, Class 3B, 1938. Her throat went dry. The first page was filled with sketches, rows of trees, the old field, a small chapel that no longer existed. Each drawing had numbers written beneath, coordinates of some kind. The last entry stopped her cold. October 3rd, 1938. Mr. Harrow says the world turns itself inside out if you find the right mirror. Tomorrow we'll see. The handwriting ended there, mid-sentence, as if the pen had been yanked away. Eleanor looked up at Tanner. Stop digging in this area. I want forensics in before another shovel goes down. He nodded, already pale. The fog thickened as the afternoon dimmed. Reporters were arriving now, their vans clogging the road beyond the fence. Eleanor turned from the noise and dialed her assistant back in Austin. Dana, it's me. Pull everything you can on Leonard Harrow, employment, birth, death, anything. And check for Roe, Clara, student records, family, grave sites. You think we found one of theirs? Dana asked. I think we found her words, Eleanor said. Sometimes that's worse. She hung up and turned toward the field again. Rain slicked her hair to her forehead. The pattern of the excavation trenches looked wrong, like concentric rings instead of straight lines. Tanner approached. You should see this. He led her to the far edge where a backhoe had scraped clean a section of floor tile still clinging to the old gym foundation. Letters were carved crudely into the tile, too deep to be student graffiti. FACTUM. Eleanor whispered the translation under her breath. It is done. Tanner blinked. Come again? Latin, she said. Somebody wanted to leave a message for anyone who'd come later. That night, long after the crew packed up, she stayed. The portable lights cast long shadows across the ruins. She sat inside her car, notebook open, recording every detail while the engine ticked. Her father's last report lay folded beside her, yellow with age. His final note. Witness from maintenance swears he heard chanting under the floor the night before disappearance. Says the sound came from the old swimming tunnel connecting gym to chapel. Eleanor stared toward the collapsed east wall. Beyond it lay the ground where the tunnel had once run. A sealed corridor leading under the hill toward the chapel. Now gone. She stepped out, boots sinking into mud. The night smelled of copper and ozone. She aimed her flashlight at the slope. There, an exposed arch of brick just visible where erosion had bitten the hill away. A tunnel mouth, dark as a wound. Her light touched water glinting deep inside, pooled and unmoving. On the wall above the arch, the faint outline of letters carved long ago. RAR. She crouched, tracing the initials. Beneath the moss, another set of smaller marks appeared, 15 tiny slashes arranged in a row. A chill spread through her chest. Not numbers. Tallies. Something moved in the tunnel, just beyond the light's reach, a ripple in the still water. Eleanor drew back. For a long moment she listened, only the drip of rain. Then came a sound she recognized too well. A whistle blowing once, faint, from somewhere below ground. She turned toward the open field, but no one was there. The air changed temperature so quickly her breath turned white. Fog curled through the gap in the hill, and the tunnel began to exhale a slow, steady breeze that smelled of chalk and old books, the same smell that had clung to her father's coat the night before he died. Eleanor whispered into the recorder she kept in her coat pocket. Field note. Ravenwell site, North Tunnel discovered. Airflow active despite collapse. Unconfirmed acoustic anomaly. One short whistle, single tone. Her voice trembled only slightly. From far down the valley, church bells began to ring midnight. Their echoes folded over each other until they sounded less like bells and more like breathing. When she turned back to the tunnel, the arch was gone, swallowed again by mist as if it had never been there. She didn't go back to the car right away. She stood in the rain until her notebook pages turned translucent, and the ink of her father's last words bled into the paper like something newly alive. By morning, the Ravenwell site had become a stage of controlled chaos. Forensic tents bloomed like white blisters across the mud, and portable heaters fought the cold mist creeping in from the river. The tunnel mouth Eleanor had found was now cordoned off with orange mesh, a hum of generators filling the silence that used to belong to birds. Dr. Kenji Aoki, lead forensic anthropologist, crouched by the archway, brushing moss from brick. It's holding, he said. Old Victorian drainage mixed with 1930s renovations. We'll stabilize the ceiling before we go in. Eleanor watched him through the vapor of her breath. Any trace readings? Low methane, high iron content, water standing at least 2 feet deep. He straightened, his expression unreadable. We also found this wedged between the bricks. He held out a glass vial, its cork sealed with black wax. Inside floated a slip of yellow paper, folded twice. Eleanor took it carefully. The wax crumbled under her glove. The cork gave a soft sigh, releasing a faint scent of iodine and dust. The paper unfurled with reluctant stiffness. A single sentence, written in fountain pen ink that had bled to gray. 15 returned. 1 was left behind. Aoki exhaled, cryptic. Or arithmetic, Eleanor said. Something doesn't add up. By noon, the engineers had shored up the first 6 meters of the tunnel. Floodlights lined the entrance, bleaching the brick in sterile white. The air that drifted out was cooler than the surface. Cellar air, preserved. Wrong. Eleanor clipped a mic to her collar. Rains entering primary conduit with Aoki and Diver 2. Timestamp 12:43 p.m. The first step sent ripples across the water, dark as oil. It reached her knees almost immediately, numbing. The beam from her flashlight caught silt suspended like dust motes, making the space look underwater, even above the surface. Every 10 feet, iron rings jutted from the wall, mounts for lamps or chains. She couldn't tell. The further they went, the narrower the passage grew until they were forced to move single file. Aoki's voice echoed ahead. Something carved here. Eleanor raised her light. The walls were scratched with dozens of overlapping marks, initials, tally lines, fragments of Latin prayers. She recognized factum again, repeated until the letters lost meaning. Beneath it, faint outlines of hands, smeared in what might once have been soot. Kids trying to find their way out, she murmured. Or someone counting how long they'd been left. Aoki said quietly. At 20 meters in, the tunnel widened into a circular chamber. A vaulted ceiling arched overhead, its bricks dripping. In the center rose a plinth of stone, waist high, the top carved into a shallow basin filled with stagnant water. Eleanor stepped closer. Something glimmered at the bottom. She reached in and retrieved a ring. Gold, engraved with the school emblem, R.A. 1938. Aoki photographed it, bagged it. Matches the class insignia. That makes at least one personal effect. Eleanor's light skimmed the floor. A faded chalk line encircled the plinth, and beyond it, scattered across the stone, were 15 small indentations, perfectly spaced. She crouched, tracing one with her gloved finger. Same pattern as the stones I found outside. Symbolic? Maybe. Or a map of where they were meant to stand. The diver called from the far side. Detective, there's a sealed hatch here. A rust-choked metal door, half submerged. The hinges looked fused by time. Eleanor knelt beside it, scraping mud away until lettering appeared. Archive. Help me with the lever, she said. They heaved together. The hatch shrieked open, releasing a surge of black water that stank of rust and age. When it settled, a narrow stair descended into deeper darkness. Aoki hesitated. That goes below ground level. Could collapse. Mark it for later, Eleanor said, though her eyes lingered on the first step. Something about the air rising from below. It carried a rhythm, faint but steady, like the pulse of a clock. Outside, twilight bled through the fog. Reporters shouted questions from behind barriers, their lenses flashing like distant lightning. Eleanor gave no comment. She walked to the edge of the field where the soil had been turned, staring at the excavation trench. Her phone buzzed. Dana from Austin. Got your background, Dana said. Harrow's file's strange. He wasn't listed under any teacher registry after 38, but there's a death certificate filed in 47 under a different name. Leonard H. Rowan. Same birth date. Cause? Fire. Unidentified remains found in an asylum basement outside Waco. Eleanor's chest tightened, and Clara Rowe. Missing until 1950. Then she reappears on a hospital census, patient at the same asylum, Died 2 years later. Eleanor's voice dropped. You're telling me both teacher and student ended up in the same place 9 years later? Looks like it. The asylum shut down in '52, records sealed, but I found one thing in the index. A note scrawled in the margin by some clerk. See Ravenwell transfer. Eleanor closed her eyes. The wind coming off the field carried the scent of wet iron again. I need the asylum's location. Sending coordinates now. She hung up. The message arrived seconds later. An address. 62 miles north. That night, she stayed at the small county motel where the wallpaper peeled like dried skin. The hum of the radiator filled the silence. She spread the evidence photos across the bedspread. Ring, satchel, vial. The carved word. Factum. Her father's handwriting hovered in her memory. Under the floor, something breathes. At 2:17 a.m., she dreamed she was back in the tunnel, the water rising to her chest. 15 figures stood around the plinth, faces pale, eyes turned upward as if watching something descend through the ceiling. When she woke, the room was silent, but for the faint ticking of her wristwatch, exactly the same rhythm she'd heard beneath the gym. She sat up and switched on the lamp. On the nightstand lay her notebook, open to a blank page. Across it, written in wet ink that wasn't hers, return always. Her pulse hammered. She checked her pen. It was dry. Outside, a whistle blew once in the distance, carried through the rain. The road north of Hollow County wound through skeletal woods and fog that never seemed to lift. By dawn, Eleanor could see the asylum through the trees. A long gray shape rising from the hilltop like a memory that refused burial. St. Leora's Institute for the Disturbed. The sign read, half buried in vines. The gates sagged open. No padlock, no chain. Just the wind pushing them back and forth with a moan. Eleanor parked near what used to be a fountain, its basin full of rainwater and leaves. The main building loomed behind it, windows blank and blind. Inside, the air smelled of plaster and cold metal. Paint curled from the walls in pale ribbons. Water dripped somewhere unseen, steady as a metronome. She switched on her recorder. Site entry, St. Leora's, approximate coordinates from County Archive. Structure abandoned 1952. Connected historically to Ravenwell case. Both Leonard Harrow and student Clara Rowe believed to have been here. Her flashlight beam caught a corridor lined with doors, each with a small square window. She glanced inside one. Rusted bed frame, restraints coiled like old veins. A faint echo rose through the hallway. Not a voice, paper rustling. She followed the sound until she reached the administration office. The door bore a brass plate. Medical Director, Dr. K.L. Marrow. The name made her stop. Harrow, Marrow. The letters rearranged themselves in her mind like a cipher. Inside, the room was chaos. File drawers dumped, floor littered with forms bleached blank by time. But one drawer, near the bottom, was still locked. She pried it open with her penknife. Inside were patient cards wrapped in waxed paper. She flipped through until 2 names stopped her heart row: Clara M. Rowan, Leonard H. Both cards bore the same note written in a different hand, jagged and hurried. Transfer under Ravenwell directive not to be released. Below that, another line, fainter. Observation continues beneath. Eleanor whispered, "Beneath what?" She turned her light upward. The plaster ceiling above the desk was cracked in a long, clean line, as though something had once pressed from the other side. She moved to the hall again, heart drumming in her ears. The corridor ended at a heavy iron door half concealed by shadow. Faded letters read sub-level access, authorized personnel only. The handle resisted, then gave with a scream. Stale air rolled out, thick with mildew. A staircase led down into darkness. Her flashlight trembled in her hand as she descended. Each step left a print in the dust, the smell of earth deepening with every turn. At the bottom, The stairs opened into a circular room lined with shelves of jars, hundreds of them, each labeled in fine handwriting. Specimens' organs, preserved in amber fluid. Her stomach turned, but curiosity anchored her. She wiped the condensation from one jar. The label read, Subject 3A. Audio reflex study. Inside floated a human ear, fused with something mechanical, a thin wire running into the cartilage. Eleanor stepped back, nearly colliding with the table behind her. On it sat a reel-to-reel tape machine, the reels fused by rust but intact. A hand-painted tag dangled from one switch. Session 15. Choir. She hesitated, then turned the crank on her field recorder to analog mode and clipped it to the output jack. The tape whirred reluctantly, then began to play. At first, only static. Then, a voice. Harrow's voice. Calm. Teacherly. They will not stop singing. It's how the threshold holds. Each child a note, each note a gate. When the harmony falters, the door breathes open. Another voice followed, female, young Clara. You said we would come back. And you will, child, in time. The mirror must learn your name first. The tape crackled, then died in a burst of hiss. Eleanor froze. A faint drip echoed in the silence. Then another sound. Softer. Rhythmic. A whistle, a single note, far away but moving closer. She spun toward the stairwell. The beam of her flashlight trembled over the walls. The jars vibrated slightly on their shelves. A breath touched her ear, cold, dry. Returned, someone whispered. Her body reacted before thought could. She bolted up the stairs, feet slipping on damp stone, flashlight beam cutting wild arcs. When she reached the first floor, she slammed the door shut behind her and leaned against it, gasping. The sound stopped. Only rain on the roof now, patient, unbothered. She checked the recorder. The tape had stopped itself, but the last 30 seconds were still counting, as though recording silence. When she played it back, she heard her own breathing, her footsteps. Then a new voice layered faintly beneath. 15 returned. 1 remains. The same words from the vial. Eleanor turned toward the nearest window. Outside, fog drifted through the courtyard. For a moment, she saw movement. Figures standing just beyond the glass. Too tall to be children, faces blurred as though underwater. She blinked, and they were gone. Her phone buzzed, startling her. Dana again. Ellie, you need to hear this, Dana said, breathless. We found another photograph in the State Archive, Ravenwell's class of 38. But this one's dated 1947. Eleanor's pulse spiked. Impossible. The students were gone. I know. But there they are. 15 kids, same faces, not aged a day. And guess who's in the background, standing behind them like he never left? Harrow, Eleanor whispered. Only the caption doesn't say Harrow. It says Dr. K.L. Marrow, Director, St. Leora's Institute. Eleanor looked at the plaque on the office door again. K.L. Marrow. The letters blurred. The air thickened. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley, shaking the walls. She gathered the 2 patient cards, slid them into her coat pocket, and walked into the rain. The asylum loomed behind her, silent except for a faint hum rising from the earth, like a song struggling to remember itself. By dawn, the fog had lifted just enough for the county courthouse to appear like a ghost, emerging from its own reflection. Eleanor pushed through the front doors, still wearing the same clothes from the asylum. Mud clung to her cuffs. Her hair smelled faintly of iron and mildew. Inside, the clerk on duty barely looked up as she showed her badge. Detective Raines, cold case authorization. I need access to sealed property records for St. Leora's and all connected state institutions between 1935 and 1952. The clerk raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of boxes. I'll take them all. He shrugged and led her down to the basement archive. where rows of shelves leaned under the weight of forgotten paper dust motes floated like snow. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed in her skull. For hours she opened file after file, each labeled in the precise, spidery hand of a bygone bureaucracy: patient transfers, funding appropriations, educational partnerships. Then one folder stopped her cold. Ravenwell Educational Exchange, 1938 to 1940, inside, typed correspondence on yellowing letterhead. To Dr. K.L. Marrow, St. Leora's Institute. From Leonard Harrow, Ravenwell Academy. Subject: continuation of mirror study. The letter read like a scientific proposal disguised as theology. The line between a thought and its reflection is thinner than we believed, and thin enough to step through. The children exhibit remarkable resonance when exposed to harmonic recitation. Phase 2 will require isolation, complete removal from external stimulus. Their disappearance must look like an act of God, or the experiment's result will be compromised. No signature, only Harrow's embossed seal, 2 interlocked circles forming an infinity loop. Eleanor's hands trembled as she turned the page. Attached was a list of student names, Clara Rowe among them, and a final line handwritten in ink darker than the rest. Observation will continue beneath. She took photographs of every sheet, the shutter clicking in the quiet like a heartbeat. When she closed the folder, another document slipped free, a small envelope marked for return. Inside lay a single glass slide, the kind used for microfilm readers. Across its label, Mirror Session 9. She fed it into the courthouse viewer. The machine whirred to life, projecting a faint, grainy image onto the wall. At first, she thought it was static, then realized it was a photograph. 15 blurred figures standing in a circle around a bright white shape. The image pulsed slightly, as though the light inside it were still alive. She adjusted the focus. The shape resolved into a mirror, tall and thin, draped in cloth. The figures' reflections were wrong, each one facing a different direction. Then she noticed the 16th reflection, a tall shadow standing behind them all. Her pulse stuttered. The caption at the bottom read, October 2nd, 1938. Mirror activation. Successful. She printed a copy and slipped it into her case file. By late afternoon, she was back in her motel room, wall now papered with photographs, diagrams, and maps. The pattern that emerged wasn't geographical. It was architectural: the Ravenwell Gymnasium, the tunnel, the sub-basement of St. Leora's. All 3 layouts shared the same blueprint proportions, 15-point radial symmetry, like spokes around a hub. At the center of each design, a circle marked simply Mirror. She stared at it until the lines blurred. Her father had once told her that every mystery has a geometry. The closer you trace it, the more it starts to resemble a mirror of yourself. She sat on the bed, pressed her palms over her face. Behind her eyelids, she saw the tunnel again, the 15 indentations. 1 remains. Her phone buzzed Dana again, voice low. I found something weird in the State Archive metadata. A crate logged under your father's badge number. It's been sealed since 1955, labeled Personal Effects, Ravenwell. They want your signature to release it. Eleanor's mouth went dry. Where? Storage Depot 7, Waco branch. I'm on my way. The depot sat on the edge of town, a concrete warehouse that smelled of motor oil and paper. A single fluorescent tube flickered overhead as the attendant wheeled out a crate stamped property of Hollow County PD. Eleanor pried it open. Inside, neatly arranged, were her father's notes, dozens of leather-bound field journals. She opened the one marked October 1955. If anyone finds this, know that the 15th didn't die. It became the gate. They built the mirror around its pulse. Harrow, or whatever's wearing him, calls it the choir now. I can hear them under the floor when the river floods. The entry ended mid-sentence. Ink smeared. Beneath the journals lay a smaller box wrapped in oilcloth. She hesitated, then unfolded it. A hand mirror rested inside, silver frame tarnished black, its surface dull with age. A note taped to the back in her father's handwriting. Found in North Tunnel, still warm. She held it up to the light. The glass shimmered faintly, as though something moved behind it. Her own reflection seemed delayed, lagging half a heartbeat behind her motion. She whispered, "What did you see, Dad?" For an instant, another face flickered over hers. Young, female, eyes wide with sorrow. Clara Rowe. The light above her sputtered. The air thickened, metallic. She lowered the mirror and the image vanished, leaving only her own pale face. Eleanor placed it back in the box, sealed the crate, and signed the release. Her signature looked nothing like her own. Back at the motel, she replayed the asylum tape again, Harrow's voice, calm as ever. The mirror learns what you love and what you hide. Then it decides which to return. She turned off the recorder, staring at her reflection in the dark TV screen. 15 children, 1 teacher, 1 mirror. 15 returned, 1 remains. She finally understood what 1 remains meant. It wasn't a survivor. It was a door left ajar. Outside, the rain began again, tapping softly at the glass, each drop in time with the faint ticking from the box on the table. When she opened it, the mirror was glowing from within, as if catching light from somewhere that didn't exist. By morning, Eleanor's motel room smelled of damp fabric and stale coffee. She hadn't slept. The mirror sat on the table under a towel, as though modesty might contain it. When the sun reached through the blinds, she packed it into an evidence case and drove toward the state forensic lab. The building rose from the flatlands like a slab of concrete faith. No windows, no identity. Inside, halogen light made everything look slightly unreal. Dr. Nikhil Shah met her at the security desk. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, sleeves rolled above precise hands. He'd worked with her father once, long ago. "You look like hell," he said quietly. "Feels worse," she answered. "I need an analysis. Object retrieved from sealed property. Possibly metallic, possibly older." "How old?" "Pre-war." He raised an eyebrow. "And you're sure this isn't evidence?" "It's what's left of one." They entered the containment room. Metal tables, cameras, temperature steady at 62. Eleanor set the mirror down. The overhead light reflected off its surface with unnatural clarity, too bright for something so tarnished. Dr. Shah leaned close. "Composition looks like silvered glass. 19th century, maybe. See the etching?" He traced a finger along the edge where a faint pattern glimmered. 15 tiny marks circling the frame. 15, he murmured. "Your number." Eleanor nodded. "Try spectroscopy." He powered up the machine. A beam of light swept across the glass, scattering into colors. The computer screen filled with data. But halfway through the scan, the line went flat, as though the beam had hit empty space. "That's impossible," Shah whispered. "It's absorbing everything. No reflectivity, no return. It's like it's swallowing the signal." Eleanor stepped closer. In the mirror, her reflection didn't move. It just stared. Then faintly, another image surfaced behind it. A hallway she didn't recognize. Walls lined with lockers, floor glistening as if wet. "Do you see that?" she asked. Shah frowned. "See what?" "The hallway." He looked again. "There's nothing but you." She swallowed hard. "Record the scan." He nodded, uneasy. The data saved as an unreadable string, binary interspersed with fragments of words. He turned the monitor so she could see. "Leave her below 15 remains." Eleanor felt the chill move through her chest like water. "Shut it down." Shah hesitated. "It's generating heat." "Now." He cut power. The lights dimmed, then flickered back. For a moment, the mirror glowed from within, faint silver mist swirling across its surface. When it cleared, her reflection was gone. She exhaled slowly. "Print the data logs and wipe the server. No one else touches this." Shaw nodded, pale. "Eleanor, what is that thing?" She looked at him with eyes that felt older than her body. A question pretending to be an answer. Outside, the sun had turned orange against a sky thick with humidity. She drove to the river, parked by the bridge where her father's old case photos had been taken. The water moved sluggishly, heavy from last night's rain. She set the mirror on the passenger seat, its surface covered again. Her phone buzzed. A new message, unlisted number. "We found her. Attached. A photograph. A skeleton half buried in river silt, rosary beads tangled around its wrist. Beneath it, a caption in block letters, Student 7 of 15. Her stomach clenched. She called Dana. "Where?" "County workers dredging the East Bend. DNA pending, but clothing matches 1938 uniform. Local PD says stay clear, but your name's on the file." Eleanor stared at the river. "There'll be more. Ellie, maybe it's time to let this one go. It's older than everyone left alive." "Not everyone," she said softly, eyes on the mirror. That night she met Shaw again at the diner off the interstate. He looked exhausted. A man trying to understand something his education hadn't prepared him for. "I went over the spectrograph data," he said. "The binary text isn't random. It's recursive. Feeds back into itself like an echo. But here's the strange part. The frequency signature matches human neural patterns during REM sleep." Eleanor stirred her coffee. "So the mirror dreams." Shaw hesitated. "Or it makes you dream for it." He slid a small printout across the table, an image generated from the data translation. It showed concentric circles, like ripples, forming a shape eerily similar to the Ravenwell seal. "Where did this come from?" she asked. "The gap in the scan." "That's not reflection. It's transmission. Something on the other side sent it back." Eleanor's voice dropped. "And if it wasn't human?" Shaw looked out the window, where rain blurred the neon signs into streaks of red. "Then whatever those kids touched, it's still waiting for someone to answer." When she returned to her room, the mirror was uncovered. She froze in the doorway. No one else had a key. On the wall opposite, 15 photographs she'd pinned earlier were now rearranged, no longer random, but forming a rough circle. At the center, the grainy still from the courthouse slide, the 15 students around the mirror. Her phone chimed again. Another unknown message. Phase 2. Reactivation begins. The sender's name flickered, then resolved into 2 words. Leonard Harrow. Eleanor's heart pounded. She typed back before reason could stop her, "You're dead." 3 dots appeared, then a reply. So were they. The lights flickered. The mirror pulsed faintly, silver to black to silver again. Like a slow heartbeat, Eleanor whispered, "You're not getting them back." But the reflection didn't agree. Later, she sat by the window, recorder in hand. Field note, day 6. The mirror responds to observation, possibly quantum reflection phenomena, possibly delusion. But the data's consistent with energy discharge. My father wasn't chasing ghosts. He was chasing the geometry of disappearance. She looked up, and for a moment saw a girl's silhouette in the glass. Young, hair tied with ribbon, staring back. Then it was gone. At dawn, the radio crackled with static before settling on a single phrase, repeated in a child's voice. Find the 15th. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the wheel as she drove toward Ravenwell. The mirror in the back seat trembled faintly with each bump of the road, as if eager to return home. The road to Ravenwell was empty, except for the wind dragging fog across the fields. Eleanor drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the evidence case beside her. The mirror hummed faintly inside, a pulse time to the rhythm of the rain. Her dashboard recorder blinked red. She hit record. Field note number 27, 6:12 a.m. Message traced to coordinates behind the Academy ruins. Temperature dropping. Mirror shows mild luminescence. I think it wants to go home. She killed the engine at the fence line beyond the fog. The skeleton of the gymnasium rose from the mud. Floodlights from the demolition crew still burning through the mist like eyes left open too long. She crossed the field, boots sinking with each step, until she reached the patch of ground where the tunnel mouth had been sealed 2 days earlier. The tarp lay torn open. Someone had been here. A footprint, bare, small, child-sized, pressed into the wet clay. Eleanor drew her flashlight and aimed it downward. Faint tracks led toward the east corner of the foundation, where a section of concrete had collapsed inward, revealing a hollow black space. She crouched, listening. Nothing but the soft inhale of wind through the gap. Then, one whistle, short, low. The same single note that had followed her since the beginning. She took out her phone, set it to record video, and slipped inside. The descent was narrow, built of brick and rebar, an unfinished sub-basement that shouldn't have existed. Water dripped from somewhere above, forming a rhythm that echoed her own heartbeat. Her flashlight caught the edge of a steel door half buried in silt. The words Phase 2 were stenciled across it in black. She pressed the handle. It opened with a sigh. Inside lay a corridor lit only by her beam. Every wall was covered in mirrored panels, hundreds of them, each cracked, each reflecting pieces of her like a puzzle that refused to fit. At the end of the corridor stood a single intact mirror framed in brass, taller than she was. It looked new, untouched by rust or time. Field note number 28. Substructure confirmed. Multiple reflective surfaces. Possible experimental chamber. Single central mirror intact. She approached slowly. Her reflection looked older than she remembered. Eyes sunken, lips pale. Behind her reflection stood shapes, 15 faint figures, all turned away. Her chest tightened. "Clara?" she whispered. The nearest figure shifted slightly, its outline sharpening in the glass. Then a child's voice, close as her own breath. "He said we'd come back." Eleanor stumbled back, flashlight beam trembling. The voice was soft, melodic, not hostile, almost relieved. "Who are you?" she managed. The mirror darkened, silver fading to gray until the reflection vanished entirely. Then words began to appear on the surface, as if breathed onto fogged glass. "We returned. Find the one who stayed," the letters smeared, dissolving into a ripple that ran across the entire pane. A sound followed. Choral, 15 voices humming in harmony, low and vibrating through her chest cavity like thunder trapped under skin. Eleanor dropped the recorder. "Stop!" she gasped. "Please!" The humming ceased. Silence. Then a single deep voice. Not Harrow's, not human, whispered through the space between seconds. "Return always." The air pressure changed. The mirror's surface bulged outward like liquid glass. Something pressed from behind, the outline of a hand, then another. Fingertips spreading the way water breaks around stone. Eleanor ran. Her boot caught the edge of the door frame, and she fell hard, the mirror's light spilling through the corridor like a silent explosion. She crawled toward the exit, dragging herself through mud until she burst back into the gray morning. The air outside tasted of rain and iron. Behind her, the foundation rumbled, then fell quiet. She lay there shaking until the sound of a helicopter grew in the distance, the county's survey team arriving early. When she opened her eyes, she realized the evidence case was gone. The mirror had stayed behind. By the time the crew landed, the ground above the sub-basement had already begun to collapse. Swallowing the entrance, Eleanor shouted over the engines, "Seal this area. No digging, no equipment until I say." The foreman looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Detective, That whole section's unstable. Then bury it deeper. She turned away before he could answer, hands still trembling. That night she returned to the motel and played back her recorder. The audio was warped, full of static. But in the middle, beneath her own breathing, came something new. A rhythm like clockwork and a voice, faint, childlike, repeating. Phase 3 begins. Eleanor pressed pause. The words continued for 2 more seconds after playback stopped, as though they'd been waiting on the tape all along. She switched off the light. The room went black. Through the window, thunder rolled again, shaking the glass. And for just an instant, she saw her reflection in it, not seated on the bed, but standing behind her, staring down with the same patience the mirror had shown. The storm broke 2 nights later. Lightning rippled over the county hills, and rain hit the excavation field like static over an old broadcast floodlights shimmered on mud and machinery. Reporters waited beyond the barricade, hungry for a headline. Detective Eleanor Raines stepped from her SUV, collar up, raincoat dark with water. The air smelled of ozone and unearthed stone. The foreman jogged toward her, shouting over the wind. "You told us to stop digging, Detective, but the ground gave way on its own, whole section caved in. You'll want to see this." She followed him past the caution tape. The crater was enormous, 30 feet across, plunging into blackness. Steam rose from it like breath. At the rim, floodlights revealed carved stone walls descending in perfect symmetry, not random collapse. Architecture. Eleanor's throat tightened. "That's not a foundation." "No, ma'am," the foreman said. "It's a room." She clipped on her headlamp and rappelled down the slick rope, boots sinking into cold mud at the bottom. Her beam cut through mist and found a doorway, half buried and sealed by a rusted iron gate. Across the arch, Latin letters had been chiseled deep. Cantus est porta. The song is the door. The words hummed faintly when she touched them, as if the stone remembered a sound. Behind her the air shifted, Dr. Shaw's voice echoing down the shaft. "I brought your equipment. Watch your step. Sensors show a secondary cavity beyond that wall." Eleanor turned back to the gate. "We'll open it." They pried until the hinges surrendered with a cry that rattled their bones. Cold air rushed out, dry as paper. The beam from her lamp swept across rows of wooden pews, warped but still standing. Candles, long burned down, dotted the aisles like fossils of light. At the far end stood an altar made of black stone. Above it, a circle carved into the ceiling. A recess exactly the diameter of the mirror she'd lost. Eleanor whispered, "The chapel beneath the gym. They built it right under the children." Shaw's voice softened. "Or for them." They moved closer. The altar was engraved with 15 small circles surrounding a larger one. Inside the central circle, faint etching spelled a date, October 3rd, 1938, and beneath it, a single word, return. Something shimmered at the base of the altar. Eleanor knelt and brushed away silt. Bone fragments, tiny, delicate, arranged deliberately, and around them, rusted instruments. Tuning forks, thin rods, even pieces of wire wound into loops, acoustic tools, Shaw murmured, like they were tuning something. A low vibration rolled through the floor, almost inaudible but felt in the chest. The floodlights above flickered. Eleanor steadied herself. "Power surge?" "Not from us." Then came the whistle, clear this time, sustained, filling the space with a single perfect note. Every tuning fork on the floor began to tremble, ringing in sympathy until the air shimmered with sound. The altar shifted. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. A seam opened down its center, revealing a hollow core. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay the mirror. Eleanor's breath caught. "It found its way back," Shaw whispered, "or it was never gone." She reached out, hesitated. The glass pulsed faintly, silver deepening to mercury black. Within it, shapes moved, 15 figures kneeling in rows, their faces serene, eyes closed. At the center, a taller form, Harrow. His hand raised as if conducting. Eleanor drew back. The figure's eyes opened in unison. Sound collapsed into silence. Then Harrow's reflection spoke without lips moving. The choir has waited for the 15th to stop watching and finally join the song. The mirror flashed white. For an instant, Eleanor wasn't in the chapel. She stood in a classroom washed in 1930s sunlight, desks neat, chalkboard clean. 15 students turned toward her. Clara Rose smiled faintly, whispering, "We didn't vanish. We changed." Thunder cracked. The vision shattered. She was back underground, heart hammering. Shaw had fallen to one knee, covering his ears. Eleanor seized the mirror, shoving it into a containment case. "We're leaving, now." They climbed the rope, rain slashing at them as they surfaced. The moment her boots hit solid ground, the crater below emitted a deep, resonant tone, an impossible harmony that vibrated through the soil. Machinery shuddered. Floodlights burst one by one. "Move!" she yelled. The crew scattered. Behind them, the earth folded inward, burying the chapel again under a wave of mud and light. When the sound finally stopped, the rain was gentle once more. Eleanor stood at the edge, case clutched tight against her chest. Shaw's face was pale. "Whatever that place was, it's not done with us." "No," she said quietly. "It's rehearsing." That night, in her motel room, she played the new recording. The background hiss carried that same impossible harmony. 15 tones woven together. At the end of the tape, her father's voice spoke softly, though he'd been dead 70 years. "Ellie, when the 15th sings, don't listen. It's not your name they're calling." She closed her eyes. Outside, the rain stopped. Inside the case, the mirror began to hum. Rain crawled across the motel window like a hand searching for entry. Eleanor sat at the desk, the mirror's case open before her. The glass glowed faintly, silver haze swirling inside like smoke remembering a shape she pressed record. Field note number 35. Mirror retrieved from subterranean chapel. Resonant frequency consistent with prior anomalies. Beginning direct observation. Her voice trembled on the last word. She steadied her breath and leaned closer. The surface rippled once, then went black. A low hum filled the room. 15 notes layered perfectly, human yet mechanical, the same harmony that had risen from the ground. The darkness deepened until it became space, vast, endless, and full of faint, moving lights. Then the scene coalesced. The north field of Ravenwell, moonlight sharp as glass. October 3rd, 1938. She was no longer watching. She was standing there. Cold air against her face, the smell of chalk dust and grass. 15 students stood in a semicircle around Mr. Leonard Harrow. Their uniforms gleamed pale under the moon. Harrow's eyes were bright, feverish, his hands moving in precise patterns. "Remember," he said, voice echoing slightly, "the world is reflection. What we call heaven looks down, waiting for us to learn its song." The children raised small tuning forks, struck them against their palms. The field shimmered. The air thickened with resonance. Eleanor wanted to move, to shout, but her body was frozen, spectator trapped inside the memory. Harrow turned toward a tall structure at the field's center, an iron frame holding the mirror. It looked exactly like the one she carried, only cleaner, newer, almost alive. "Phase 2, he whispered. "Sing." The children began to hum, each pitch different yet perfectly aligned, a chord so pure it felt like light. The mirror responded, surface rippling outward, catching the moonlight and bending it into impossible geometry. Then came the wind, rising, circling, howling like breath from a deeper place. The grass flattened outward in a spiral. Harrow raised his hand, trembling with awe. "Do you see it? The threshold! Eleanor did see it. The reflection in the mirror no longer matched the world behind them. The sky inside was darker, shot through with faint silver shapes moving like schools of fish. The children's reflections lifted their heads one by one, eyes luminous. The first stepped forward and passed through the glass. No scream, no blood, just a ripple of light where a body had been. Then the second, the third. Each child stepping forward willingly, faces serene, dissolving into light. Harrow wept openly, voice breaking. 15 for the door, and I remain. But when the last child touched the mirror, something changed. The cord fractured. One note wavered, discordant. The mirror's surface shook violently. The wind became a scream. Harrow tried to step back, but the glass pulled at him, its surface turning viscous. His reflection reached out, fingers locking around his wrist. No, wait! Eleanor's heart pounded. The scene convulsed. Light collapsing inward, a sound like shattering bells tore through her skull. Then, silence. The field was empty. Only the mirror remained, humming faintly, its surface rippling with 15 faint silhouettes drifting like ink underwater. And Harrow, his body slumped nearby, breathing shallow, eyes open but vacant. He crawled toward the mirror, whispering, "Not done. One must remain." He touched the frame. His reflection stood, whole, alive. "Marrow," the reflection said, voice perfectly calm. "You will teach them again." Then Harrow smiled, weakly. "Yes, I'll teach." The reflection stepped out of the mirror, leaving his body limp in the grass. The new Harrow adjusted his collar, dusted his coat, and walked toward the distant lights of the school. Eleanor's stomach turned. She whispered. He walked out of himself. The vision flickered. The field dissolved into darkness again, replaced by the motel room. Her reflection in the mirror smiled, a heartbeat late. Field note number 36. Observation complete. Harrow's consciousness duplicated through reflective medium children absorbed, unclear if alive or transposed. Mirror acts as vessel for harmonic imprint. She stopped the recording. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. An hour later, she drove to the old church at the edge of town, the only place that still had power after the storm. She needed quiet, maybe faith, maybe both inside. Candles burned low, their light flickering across stained glass that looked almost liquid. She sat in the back pew and set the mirror on the bench beside her. Rain whispered against the roof. For a long time, she said nothing. Then a voice from the shadows. "You finally listened." She turned. A man stood at the altar, tall, coat damp, face half hidden by the candlelight. Harrow, or the thing wearing him. "I saw what you did," she said, voice steady. "They didn't vanish. You turned them into music." He smiled gently, almost kindly. "They asked to see what lies beyond reflection. I only gave them the key. They were children. They were believers. Do you know what faith becomes when it's perfect? Sound. Unbroken sound." Eleanor stood, gripping the mirror case. "It ends tonight." He stepped closer. "It can't end. It repeats. You hear it, don't you? The harmony under everything. You've heard it since birth." The candles flickered, their flames bending toward her like compass needles. She felt pressure in her skull, a vibration deep enough to taste. "Open it," Harrow whispered. "Let them return." For a heartbeat, she almost did. The mirror pulsed softly, like something alive pleading to be seen. Then she slammed the case shut. "They don't belong to you." Harrow's expression hardened. "Neither do you." The church lights burst, plunging everything into darkness. The last thing she saw was his reflection in the case lid, smiling as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Eleanor drove without destination, rain carving rivers down the windshield. The mirror sat locked in the passenger seat, humming like a second heartbeat. Every few minutes, a shimmer of light pulsed through the cracks of the case, as though something inside was breathing. Her mind kept replaying the image from the church, the reflection stepping free, Harrow reborn in his own opposite. If the mirror could do that once, it could do it again. Maybe it already had. The highway blurred. She realized with a start that she didn't remember the last 20 miles. The GPS showed her back on the Ravenwell Road. She whispered, "No, I left this behind." The rearview mirror flickered. For an instant, her reflection smiled before she did. At sunrise, she pulled into a diner at the edge of Hollow County. The waitress, gray hair, name tag that read Marlene, poured coffee without looking up. "You all right, honey?" Eleanor's voice rasped. "Do I look all right?" "You look tired," Marlene said. "But then, you've been here before." Eleanor froze. "Excuse me?" The woman nodded toward the booth by the window. "Couple nights ago, you sat there with that same case, said you were waiting for the others to arrive." "I wasn't here," Eleanor whispered. Marlene frowned. "Suit yourself. But whoever she was, she sure looked like you." Outside, a truck roared past, its headlights flaring against the glass. In the reflection, Eleanor saw two versions of herself sitting in the booth, one drinking coffee, the other watching. When the light faded, only she remained. She called Dr. Shaw from the parking lot, voice trembling. "Shaw, listen to me. I think there's, God, I don't know how to say it, another me. Someone who looks like me." "Where are you?" he asked. "Heading back to the site." "Eleanor, don't. The county sealed it this morning. I've got reports of trespassers already, one of them claiming to be you." Her grip tightened on the phone. "That's what I'm telling you. It's not me." "Then where's the mirror?" She looked at the case. The metal was cold, humming faintly under her fingertips. "With me, I think. Bring it to the lab. Now." The drive took 2 hours through mist and empty farmland. When she reached the lab, the front door hung open, security lights strobing in alarm. Inside, everything was silent. Shaw's office was wrecked, papers scattered, computers smashed. On the wall, someone had drawn 15 circles in charcoal, connected by a single line, at the center, her name, Eleanor Raines. Her chest tightened. "Shaw?" From the corridor, a faint sound, metal on tile. She followed it to the containment room. The door was ajar. Inside, Dr. Shaw stood with his back to her, staring at something glowing on the table. The mirror, out of its case. "Shaw," she said, "step away from it." He didn't move. "I didn't open it," he said quietly. "You did." Her blood ran cold. "That's not true." He turned. His face was pale, eyes wide with disbelief. "You were here, Eleanor. You came in 2 hours ago, said you needed to see them again. You told me not to interfere." She shook her head. "That wasn't me." He pointed at the mirror. "Then who's that?" Eleanor turned and froze. In the reflection stood another her, calm, clean, hair dry, eyes serene. The reflection smiled and raised a finger to its lips. "Don't," Eleanor whispered. Shaw reached for the mirror. "What is—" The glass flared white. For an instant, his reflection and body misaligned, like a film reel slipping its frame. Then he was gone. Only the mirror remained, its surface rippling, showing an empty room with a single shadow standing at its center. Eleanor stumbled back. "What did you do to him?" The reflection, her reflection, stepped forward, speaking in her voice. "He's below, where you left the rest." Eleanor grabbed a metal stool and hurled it at the glass it struck, shattering the frame. But the surface didn't break. Instead, the reflection caught the stool's reflection and threw it back. The real stool hit the wall behind her, denting steel. The lights flickered. The mirror's glow intensified until the room pulsed silver. Eleanor grabbed the case. slammed it over the glass, and locked it. The humming ceased instantly. She fell to her knees, gasping. When she came to, the clock on the wall read 3:33 a.m. Her watch showed 9:15, 6 hours missing. She checked the security feed. The camera showed her entering the lab twice, once at 9 p.m., once again at midnight. Both versions identical. The first carried the mirror in. The second carried it out. Eleanor whispered, "Which one am I?" She reached for her phone. Dead battery. On the desk lay a note written in her own handwriting. "It isn't possession. It's rehearsal." Below it, another line. "Return before dawn." Her hands shook as she pocketed the note. She looked toward the mirror's case. It was cold, silent, but faint condensation bloomed on the inner side of the glass window, forming words before fading. Almost home. Outside, the night was windless, the moon too bright. She drove back toward the Ravenwell site, unable to stop herself. Each mile marker flickered past like a metronome. Halfway there, the radio switched on by itself static. Then a recording. Her own voice. Field note number 27, 6:12 a.m. "I think it wants to go home." The message looped once, then changed. Same voice, but softer. "And it wants me to follow." Eleanor gripped the wheel, whispering, "Not yet." From the passenger seat, the case began to hum again. A deep tone resonating in her bones. The lid vibrated. A single hairline crack spread across the metal latch. She pressed harder on the accelerator. Behind her, in the rearview mirror, headlights appeared. Another car following at perfect distance. Her own car. The night pressed close as Eleanor drove the final mile to Ravenwell. The cracked road twisted through skeletal trees, their branches clawing at the clouds. The headlights washed over the warped, "No trespassing" signs nailed to posts like old warnings no one had obeyed in decades. The second car still followed. Same make, same dented fender, same beam pattern. Every time she slowed, it slowed. When she accelerated, so did it. She couldn't see the driver, just the silhouette of her own shape behind the glass. At the final curve, she killed the lights and coasted downhill. The air was heavy with river mist. The ruins of the old observatory loomed ahead, half buried in ivy and silt, the place where 15 students had vanished in 1938. The mirror's hum pulsed stronger with every breath she took, matching her heartbeat. She parked at the gate and stepped out. Gravel crunched. The other car stopped 50 yards back. Its engine idled. Eleanor whispered to the fog, "You wanted me here. Now what?" No answer. Only the whisper of water beyond the ridge. She lifted the case and walked toward the ruins. The metal was almost vibrating now, straining against her grip. A pale light flickered within the cracks of the lid. Inside the shattered dome, moonlight spilled through a hole in the roof, illuminating the central platform where the telescope once stood. The stones were slick with algae. Beneath them, the faint sound of rushing water. The subterranean river that had swallowed the missing students. Eleanor placed the case on the platform. The hum stopped. Behind her, footsteps. She turned. The second Eleanor stepped out of the fog. Hair dry, clothes clean, eyes unnervingly calm. The twin tilted her head in greeting. "You came back," the reflection said. Its voice was her own, but smoother, unburdened. "What are you?" Eleanor whispered, "Completion." Eleanor backed away. "You're from the mirror." The twin smiled. "No, you are." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Rain began to fall, fine and cold, dripping through the broken dome. "I watched you," Eleanor said. "In the diner, at the lab. You were ahead of me, always." "That's because I remember what you forget," the reflection replied. "You think this began with you finding the mirror, but it didn't. You brought it here because it belongs here. With us." "Us?" The reflection gestured toward the river. The mist thickened, swirling. 15 silhouettes emerged within it. Faint outlines of young men and women in 1930s uniforms, their faces half light, half shadow. "The students?" Eleanor whispered. "They were the first to see through," the reflection said softly. Dr. Harrow built the mirror to capture the absence between light and dark. A passage, not a reflection they crossed willingly. "They died. They changed," the twin said. "Like you will." Eleanor stared at the figures. They hovered at the edge of the mist, neither approaching nor retreating. Their eyes shimmered silver, vacant yet pleading. "What do you want from me?" "To finish what Harrow began, to anchor the reflection." Eleanor's chest tightened. "I'm not your anchor." The reflection smiled gently. "Then why are you the only one left who sees us?" The case on the platform clicked open by itself. The lid rose. The mirror inside pulsed with light, rippling like water. The twin extended her hand. "One step and you'll understand. The others waited 70 years for someone who could hear their call." Eleanor felt the pull, a soft, inexorable tug from the glass. The reflection's voice wrapped around her like warmth. "Let go," it whispered. "You've carried their story long enough, now be part of it." She took a step forward, then stopped. Something inside her cut through the trance. Dr. Shah's voice from weeks ago, warning her that the mirror didn't show what was, but what it wanted. She whispered, "You're not me." The reflection tilted its head, curious. "Then who are you?" Eleanor's fingers closed around the flare gun on her belt. She fired. Red light exploded through the dome, searing across the mirror. The glass surface convulsed, rippling violently. The reflection screamed, not in pain, but in fury. The silhouettes dissolved, screaming voices rising like wind through tunnels. The reflection lunged at her, its form flickering between solid and smoke. They collided, crashing against the stone. The world fractured, images strobing. Harrow's face, the river swallowing the students, her own hands digging in the dirt, mirrors shattering in endless hallways. Eleanor felt her lungs fill with cold water, though she wasn't underwater. Her reflection's hands pressed against her face. "Don't fight it," it whispered. "You'll only divide again." Eleanor reached for the case, fumbling for the latch. The reflection seized her wrist. "You'll never destroy it," it said. "Maybe not," she gasped, "but I can bury it." With a surge of strength she didn't know she had, she shoved the case over the edge of the platform. It fell, crashing through the cracked stone floor and into the river below. A column of light shot upward, blinding. The reflection screamed again, its voice fracturing into dozens of overlapping tones. Water burst through the fissures in the floor, rising fast, roaring. Eleanor stumbled toward the exit, but her twin blocked the path, flickering between forms, half her, half something older. "Don't you see?" it cried. "You're the mirror now, the last surface they can use to come back." Then the platform collapsed. Eleanor fell, water swallowing her whole for a heartbeat. She saw the reflection falling beside her, mouths open in unison, eyes wide. Then everything went dark. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on the riverbank. Dawn was gray, the sky streaked with smoke. The ruins had collapsed completely. No twin, no case, just the hum of current beneath the earth. Her clothes were soaked, her skin freezing, but she was alive. She crawled to the edge of the water. The surface was smooth, reflective, like glass. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then, faintly, 15 figures appeared beneath the surface, the students serene, drifting together. At their center stood her reflection, smiling. Then, one by one, they faded. The river ran clear again. Eleanor whispered, "It's over." Behind her, a voice replied, soft and certain, "No, it's only begun." She turned, no one there. Just the empty air vibrating with faint, rhythmic echoes, like the pulse of something buried but awake. She looked down at her hands. Her palms shimmered faintly, a sheen of silver catching the dawn light. Morning light barely touched the ruins. The storm had cleared, leaving the air raw and still. Rescue crews had not yet arrived. The valley was quiet, except for the low gurgle of the river swallowing its secrets. Eleanor sat on a rock above the wreckage, body shaking from exhaustion. Mud streaked her coat, blood darkened her sleeve, but her eyes stayed fixed on the river's surface, flat, silver, and disturbingly calm. The hum she'd carried in her bones for days was gone. The silence felt unnatural, like a held breath. She reached for her recorder. It was cracked, half-soaked, but still worked field note number 42. Subterranean structure collapsed at 4:17. Mirror submerged. Anomalous vibrations ceased. I may be the only surviving witness, but I don't think I came back alone. Her voice shook. The skin of her palm still gleamed faintly when the light hit it right, a trace of mercury sheen that no scrubbing removed. She stared at the water until dizziness forced her to move. Behind her, the remains of the academy looked almost peaceful, just another ruin reclaimed by Earth. But she couldn't shake the sense that something underneath was still listening. She drove back to Hollow County headquarters. The building felt smaller than she remembered. The front desk clerk glanced up, startled. "Detective Rains, thought you were on leave." "I was," she said quietly. "I'm closing a file." The clerk frowned. "What file?" "Ravenwell Academy. Case 38-15. He blinked. "That case doesn't exist." She set her badge on the counter. "Then open your archives." After a long pause, he led her downstairs to the record vault. The smell of dust and iron was heavy. Rows of shelves stretched into the dark, filled with boxes older than the building itself. The clerk stopped at a rusted cabinet marked Hollow County, Historical Transfers. "Everything before 1960 was microfilmed and sealed," he said. "If it's here, it's there." Eleanor pulled open the drawer. Inside, reels labeled Hollow County Juvenile Records, St. Leora's Institute, and finally, Ravenwell Academy, Restricted. The reel rattled slightly when she picked it up. Something inside had broken loose. She threaded it into the old reader and cranked the handle. The film began to spin. Frames flickered by. Student lists, newspaper clippings, blurred faces. Then the screen froze on a single image. Ravenwell Academy faculty, 1938. She leaned close. There was Harrow in the center, smiling faintly. Behind him, the 15 students, and at the far right end of the row, her own face Eleanor's breath caught. The frame burned in the projector light, melting the image into white. The clerk leaned forward. "Detective, what is it?" But when she turned, he was gone. The room was empty. The lights flickered. For a moment, the walls seemed to pulse, echoing a low rhythmic sound, 15 heartbeats overlapping. She whispered, "No, not again." The film began spinning backward on its own, whirring faster, faster, until it stopped on a blank frame. Then words appeared across the screen in handwriting she recognized. Her father's, if you're seeing this. It means the mirror chose you as its next anchor before you ever knew its name. They wanted a door, Eleanor. They built one. The choir needs an anchor, someone to remember. I tried to stop it. I failed. Don't let it sing again. The projector went dark. Eleanor tore the reel free, stuffing it into her coat. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold the flashlight. When she reached the stairwell, the air above shimmered like heat. Shadows moved within it. Tall, blurred shapes, almost human. She forced herself up the steps. At the top, daylight spilled across the hallway. But every window reflected a different scene. The field in 1938, the chapel below ground, the asylum corridors all alive, as though time were folding back on itself. She ran for the exit. Outside, the town was deserted. Cars stood abandoned, engines idling. Shop doors hung open. The world looked drained of sound. She drove through empty streets until she reached the courthouse, the one with the archive basement where she'd first found Harrow's letters. The front doors stood wide, papers fluttering out like white leaves. Inside, the main chamber glowed with pale light. At its center stood the mirror, unbroken. Eleanor stopped breathing. It rested upright against the judge's bench, perfectly polished, no case, no crack. Its surface rippled once, showing not a reflection but the interior of the chapel again, reconstructed, whole. From within, Harrow's voice, calm, patient. "You saw the truth, Eleanor. Now choose." 15 figures appeared behind him, the students silent, waiting. "If you walk away," he said, "the song dies, and so do they. If you stay, it continues, harmony restored. No more division." Eleanor's throat closed. "They deserve peace." Harrow smiled gently. "Peace is the absence of sound. Would you really silence them?" The mirror's light spilled across the marble floor, creeping toward her boots. Her fingers brushed the recorder in her pocket. Field note number 43. Final entry. The mirror has reformed. It's offering choice. But every offer it gives is a trap. There's only one silence it fears. She drew her father's old revolver. Not loaded for killing, just destruction. The reflection Harrow's smile faltered. "Don't." "Goodbye, Father," she whispered. Not to him, but to the memory of the man who had drowned chasing this same light. She fired. The bullet shattered the corner of the mirror. Light erupted, silver turning red, the surface twisting into liquid shards. The sound that followed wasn't music anymore. It was the scream of metal tearing from time. Windows exploded. Papers ignited midair. Eleanor shielded her face and fell backward. When the light died, only smoke remained. The mirror was gone. No shards, no frame, nothing, just a faint smell of ozone and salt. She lay on the floor, chest heaving, ears ringing. The courthouse clock struck once. The sound was clean, ordinary human. She exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. An hour later, she turned herself in at the county station, hands trembling as she handed over her badge. "There's no crime," the officer told her gently. "No one even remembers the case you're talking about." Eleanor smiled faintly. "That's the point." She walked out into the morning light, the sun rising over Hollow County, bright and merciless. For the first time, no reflection followed her in the glass of nearby windows. But as she passed the river bridge, she heard it. A single, distant note carried on the wind, fading fast. A voice that sounded like Clara Rose whispering, "Return, always." The year was 2055. Morning light crept through the cracked glass of the Hollow County Historical Museum. The curator, a young archivist named Lena Raines, arrived early. Coat still wet from fog. She unlocked the climate room and inhaled the scent of paper and dust. In the corner stood a crate labeled Evidence, Ravenwell Case, recovered 2025. It had been transferred from the courthouse storage after a flood exposed a sealed compartment in the basement wall. Inside were a few warped notebooks, a broken recorder, and one photograph. 15 smiling students in sepia tone, the school's ivy-covered facade behind them. Lena adjusted her glasses. Her supervisor had told her the story. A mass disappearance from the 1930s, unsolved. A detective decades later, also a Raines, had reopened it and then vanished herself. Family coincidence, the supervisor had said. Happens more often than you think. But Lena had always felt the name tug like a thread through time. She cataloged each artifact carefully. The recorder was rusted, but the tape inside looked intact. She placed it in the transfer deck, clicked play static. Then a voice, faint, female, steady despite exhaustion. Field note number 43. The mirror has reformed. It's offering choice. There's only one silence it fears. The tape crackled, skipping. Then another whisper followed, softer, almost lost in the hiss. If you find this, you already know the song. Lena froze. The voice was familiar. Her mother's recording sounded almost identical. But she didn't have a mother's voice on file. Her mother had died when she was born. The tape ended with a single tone, pure, bell-like, fading into silence. The lights in the room dimmed for a second, then steadied. Lena shivered. She looked at the photograph again. One of the student faces at the edge of the group seemed newer, clearer than the others, as if retouched. The girl's eyes were the same pale gray as her own. She blinked. The image returned to normal. That afternoon, the museum director stopped by. "Everything all right, Rains?" "Fine," Lena said too quickly. "Just tired." He smiled. "Good. The state wants a display ready for next week's anniversary of the Ravenwell closure. Make it look solemn but hopeful. People like closure." When he left, she muttered, "They always do." She turned back to the crate. Something glinted at the bottom, small, metallic. She brushed away packing dust. A hand mirror, its frame tarnished black, glass clouded with age. Tag attached, found near riverbank. Unidentified. Her pulse stuttered. It looked ordinary, but when she lifted it, a faint hum vibrated through her fingertips, barely there, like memory. She laughed nervously. Old electronics interference, she told herself. But her reflection didn't quite move with her. The delay was slight. A heartbeat at most. Lena set it down. She recorded a note in the catalog log. Item 12. A. Mirror. Provenance unknown. Condition stable. Emits low-frequency vibration. Possible environmental artifact. Her hands were shaking. That night she stayed late, rewriting labels. The museum empty except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Rain began outside, tapping against the tall windows. In its rhythm, she thought she heard faint music. 15 notes blending and separating, always returning to one. She turned on the recorder again. The same voice, Eleanor's voice, filled the room. "We thought silence was safety. But silence is only the echo waiting for its next note," Lena whispered. "Who are you to me?" The tape hissed, then answered with words not recorded before. "Look in the glass." Her stomach knotted. Slowly, she reached for the mirror. The surface darkened, swallowing the room's reflection. Shapes flickered, children in uniforms, a woman standing among them, hair plastered with rain, revolver in hand. Then all of them turned to face her. She gasped and dropped the mirror. It didn't break. It landed with a dull, soft sound, as though it had fallen into water. When she picked it up, her reflection smiled. Her reflection's lips moved first. "You've cataloged enough, Lena. Time to remember." The lights went out. Only the glow from the glass remained. For a long moment, there was no sound except her breathing, and, faintly, from inside the mirror, the ticking of a clock. Then she heard footsteps approaching behind her. She turned, but the room was empty. The reflection tilted its head. "You can finish what I couldn't," it whispered. Lena backed away, voice shaking. "I don't even know what this is." "It's your inheritance." The mirror's glow deepened, spilling silver light across the floor. Within it, a faint silhouette appeared. Eleanor Rains, older, eyes weary but kind. "Grandmother," Lena whispered without understanding how she knew. Eleanor's reflection nodded. "The song never dies, Lena. It waits for those who listen. Seal it, or it begins again." "How?" "Return it to the water." The image faded. The hum grew stronger, vibrating through every pane of glass in the room until each one trembled. Outside, thunder rolled. Lena clutched the mirror to her chest, heart racing. She ran out into the rain, down the museum steps, through the empty street toward the river bridge. The storm smelled of iron. At the center of the bridge, she leaned over the railing. The water below was black, moving slow. For an instant, she saw 15 points of light beneath the surface, like candles drifting downstream. "Return always," she whispered. She threw the mirror. It sliced through the rain and vanished with barely a ripple. The lights below winked out. The hum ceased. She waited. The storm eased. The world went quiet. When she turned back toward town, the museum lights flickered once, then steadied. Lena pressed her hand to her heart. Her pulse was her own again. 2 weeks later, a new exhibit opened at the Hollow County Museum. The Ravenwell Mystery, Faith, Sound, and Silence. Visitors drifted past displays of old letters, photographs, and a single cracked recorder that occasionally emitted faint static when no one was near. In a locked drawer beneath the curator's desk lay a small piece of black glass no larger than a coin, too smooth to be rock, too opaque to be mirror. Lena had found it on her doorstep the morning after the storm. She kept it as a reminder that some stories never finish. They just rest between reflections. Every night as she closed the museum, she paused before the glass doors. Her reflection looked back, exactly in sync. Usually. Sometimes, if she stayed long enough, it smiled first.